Good morning to you all. This is a great week. If you've looked outside, stepped outside, you know that this week is a warm week. So it is good news there. We have several other things to share with you. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and get started so we can talk about updates, announcements, talk about prayer, and a word of encouragement. Again, some exciting news is that last week we finished up the book of Acts, which means now we're turning to the book of Romans. You should have gotten an email from Dave, just a slight overview of the book, and making mention that we'll be in Romans 1 through 17 this evening. So, if you're available for that phone call, it's at 7 o'clock. We'd strongly encourage all of our members that can be a part of that. It's great to hear you on the phone, and what an opportunity to study God's Word. The other thing to make mention of is that we did get an India ink. Now, last week you may have remembered you got an email from me, but there's no video. I was stuck at home with the snow and ice and everything. So I just want to make sure to go over these things, whether it's said before or not. But we did get an India ink in the mail, and so we'll post that in the back. Again, this is part of the India missions that we support each month. We want our members to be informed on what's going on and be involved in that. So we got that in the mail, and we also received the Searchlight, which is from In Search of the Lord's Way. They have a good article here, and they have some information about radio programs, TV programs. So if you'd like to know more about that, that will also be on the back bulletin board. With those things mentioned, I want to remind you about Sunday mornings of Bible study is still planned, still scheduled to meet here 9:45 for Bible study. We'll look forward to that. There will be an adult class, and there are classes for younger people as well. And then, all goes well, we will live stream Sunday's service here on Facebook at 10:30. And Dave will be the one preaching that day. Some of you may know this, but myself, Hannah, and a few of the youth here are going to be in Tennessee. We leave on Friday, and we won't get back until Sunday evening, which means I won't be able to be here in person to preach, but Dave has agreed to do that, and Dave will be doing the Sunday night Bible study. Again, thankful for that. He'll finish up talking about the book of Jude Sunday evening. The other thing to make mention is that, Lord willing, all things go well in safety and traveling, that we will be able to return Sunday evening, and that means hopefully Monday I'll be able to spend some time in the office and upload the service from Facebook to YouTube. If you're watching this video here, if you get an email about the video, just know if you have access to Facebook, it will be streamed there, and it should stay on Facebook Sunday all day. You could go and watch it Monday. But if you like watching the videos, if you don't have Facebook and you watch them on YouTube, then please be patient with us, and we should have the service uploaded by Monday. That is the intent. That is the hope. The other things that's exciting news, again, I feel like we have a lot of that going on this week, is to remind you about March 7th. March 7th is the scheduled Sunday to come back in person for Sunday evening services. And so right now we've just been meeting Sunday morning in person and been doing the other meeting Sunday evening, Wednesday evening by phone call. But come March, if the numbers continue to still drop, if they're low, and people are getting the vaccine, people are healthy, plan is March 7th, that Sunday will come back Sunday evening here in person for service. So please, don't stay home. Don't wait for that phone call. Be here in person if you can, March 7th. That's also the first Sunday of the month, so it'll be a busy day where we'll have the elders meeting at 4 o'clock and the men's meeting at 4:30. That is the plan as of now. With that said, then March 10th, the following Wednesday, would be the Wednesday we plan to come back in person for Wednesday night service. So please be aware of that. We will have an adult class out here. They will continue going through Romans as we started tonight. They'll continue that, and there will be a class for the youth group and perhaps a few others. But I believe the ladies' class will remain out here for the time being. So be aware of those things. We look forward to real exciting news. Those are the things I have to share with you, things I have to update you about. So it is time for us to turn to God's Word and talk about prayer. Prayer is something that, as we do this video week after week, even last week, where there wasn't a physical video but still an email sent, it is important to talk about prayer. It's important to talk about encouragement from God's Word. So we want to do that today. Today we're going to look at Daniel chapter 6, verse 10. Daniel chapter 6, verse 10. Perhaps you know of this account, but let's read over it together. Daniel 6:10, it says this. Now when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went home, and in his upper room, with the windows open toward Jerusalem, he knelt down on his knees 3 times that day and prayed, and gave thanks before his God, as was his custom since early days. There's quite a bit of things to point out. But there at the beginning it says he knew it was written. But what is he talking about? Again, if you know this account, if you know what happens in the early verses, there was a decree that was signed by the king. Daniel's fellow workers were getting upset that Daniel was receiving the special treatment, that he was becoming the employee of the month, per se. They were getting upset at Daniel, and so they were trying to figure out a way of how is it that they could get the king to turn on Daniel. How is that he could be punished? And the only thing they found that he could be found guilty of is his loyalty to God. And so they had a decree sent before the king, mentioned to him, have him signed that decree, that one could only ask or pray to the king for 30 days. So for 30 days, you couldn't go to the one true God. You couldn't go to any other false god, but you'd have to go to the king and him alone. But as we read Daniel 6:10, even though Daniel knew such a thing was written, even though he knew such thing was a law, yet Daniel still prayed to God 3 times that day. What an amazing thing. It also tells us that his windows were open. It wasn't something he tried to hide. Now, he did it in his own home, but he had the windows open. It doesn't tell us that he perhaps shouted his prayer, but yet it still was an opportunity for others to perhaps overhear Daniel, to know of what was taking place. Again, in his prayer, he gave thanks to God, and Daniel had been doing this, we see 6:10 tells us that he'd been doing this for some time. It was his custom since the early days. This isn't something Daniel just started doing, that he said, well, if there's a law written, I'm going to pray even more. I'm going to be more public about this and opening those windows. But this was his custom. It was a habit formed, something he had been doing for a while. And he was committed to God, he was dedicated to God, and no new law was going to get in the way of that. One example Daniel is for us, that you and I would go to God in prayer. It says here Daniel went to God 3 times. 3 times. Now that would perhaps indicate that that he went to God no more than 3 times in a day. But we also don't know how long his prayers were, whether they were real short or whether they were real long. But what we know is that he went to God 3 times, thanking God for what he had. You and I have that opportunity today to go to God, realize the blessings we have in our life, and be able to thank God for them. So maybe we learn that example from Daniel. And to talk about our word of encouragement from God's word, we'll just stay right here in Daniel 6, but look at verses 26 through 28. 26 through 28. And this is not so much about Daniel as you know, between verse 10 and this verse, Daniel's thrown into the lion's den, and upon the next morning, Daniel is able to get out of the lion's den. God had protected him. And that's some good news. That ought to be encouragement. But let's read what happens just after that. Verse 26 through 28. This is King Darius who's making a decree. He says, I make a decree that in every dominion of my kingdom men must tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. Again, there were these other images, these other false idols that people were worshiping. And again, the king had just signed a decree that people were to go to him and make these petitions and make these requests. But now he's telling his people, his subjects, his servants, he's telling them, you must tremble and fear before the God of Daniel, the one true God. For he is the living God and steadfast forever. His kingdom is the one which shall not be destroyed, and his dominion shall endure to the end. He delivers and rescues, and he works signs and wonders in heaven and on earth. Who has delivered Daniel from the power of the lions? Now that's pretty incredible to read. I want to read this last verse, verse 28. It says this, so this Daniel prospered in the reign of Darius and in the reign of Cyrus the Persian. That's important. We're going to talk about these things. Perhaps you can go over it yourself and really take note of what's being said there. But we see King Darius, he acknowledges God, acknowledges him as the one true God, that God's kingdom will not be destroyed. We perhaps talk about that in the New Testament, and talk about God's kingdom, and we talk about the church. That no matter what comes against the church, it will not be destroyed. But even King Darius recognized that in the day of Daniel, in the time of Daniel. He goes on to say that God delivers and rescues, and he uses the example of Daniel. Look at Daniel. He was a servant of God, a worker of God, and here God has delivered and rescued Daniel. So it is that God will rescue and deliver you if you are his worker, if you're his servant, his child, belonging to him. And again, we read verse 28, which is important as well. It says that Daniel prospered. And not only under King Darius, but under the Persian king as well. He prospered. Why? He was faithful, obedient unto God. God took care of him. You and I, may we be encouraged to do the right thing. That we would always do the right thing. That we would always serve God. That even if it means perhaps losing this earthly life, we know as his children there's something far greater for us. I hope that this has been encouragement to you. I hope of reading Daniel 6:10 remind you about prayer. That again, you would take some time today. That you'd thank God for the things in your life. You go to God asking for help for the things in your life. That you know that there are others around you who are sick and need prayers. You'd be praying for them on their behalf. And I hope these updates, these things, keep you informed on what's going on here. And again, very, very exciting news. Very, very exciting things going on. We look forward to them. Again, may have been stated before, but there are some of you that will be coming back hopefully this week, if not the next week to come. We're glad. We're really excited about that. Those of you that are still taking a little bit more time, we understand. We were praying for you. We're glad that you're able to be on the phone call. We're glad that you're able to watch these services, partake in that way from home. But we do pray in time we're all able to gather here collectively, worshiping God together.